good morning and welcome to Rising, and let there be light, because we are now in what, I don't remember if it's daylight savings time or undaylight savings time, whatever it is.
We've sprung forward.
We now have another hour of pleasant daylight in the evening, which I love. Sagar and Jetty, the former host of this show, is a vocal opponent of this regime. I think he believes that more sunny time in the evenings is bad for families and contributes to people like having a long happy hour or something. But I love happy hour and am very in favor of not, I hate when you leave the office and it's dark out already. It's terrible.
Not good.
So I'm in a pleasant mood. How about you?
That's what's elevated your spirits, Robby.
Temporarily.
I did not know there was this division of opinion on the right of daylight savings time. I am in equally good spirits and glad to get started with another busy day, busy week. So what is on your radar?
Well, we're going to end up fighting about this one, Niall. Let's get to it. One of the most frequently recurring revelations of the last several years is that the mainstream media is desperately out of touch with ordinary Americans. Our elite commentator class reflexively trusts the expert consensus, even when experts discredit themselves, as they did with COVID. The consensus wants to promote progressive social and cultural policies that vast majorities of people find deeply off-putting, and they display an endless appetite for American military interventionism in far-flung regions of the earth. The voters keep trying to tell the people in charge they just want America first. They want to be largely left alone. They don't want language and behavior overly policed. They want a social safety net and for government to, yes, prioritize fixing problems at home, not try to become the world policeman or send billions of dollars overseas for unclear reasons. But the MSM exists in a bubble, and so every time the majority of Americans speak up and make their priorities clear, the bubble briefly bursts, then is desperately reconstructed. I swear, every week there's some new poll showing that a majority of people agree with President Trump on some policy, foreign policy, the border, federal spending, etc. Each and every time, the media is shocked to learn this. Every time. Last week was no different. We've been assured over and over again by the media that what Elon Musk and the Department of Government Efficiency are doing is very, very unpopular. Surely Americans are moved by the plight of the laid-off federal workers. Surely they think Elon is cutting vital government programs. People must want an end to this madness. This is not what they voted for. And on and on and on it goes. There's only one way to settle this, of course. Let's actually do a poll. CNN pollster Harry Enton, a mainstream media figure who actually just does his job and does it quite well, reports the facts that he gathers. Well, he parsed the numbers, and guess what? Take a look.
This, to me, was one of the more shocking figures that I saw. Made me go, wait a minute, hold on one second. Whoa! Americans on Trump and Joe's efforts. Musk and DOGE should influence government spending and operations. Look at this. 54%. The majority say that he and they should. How about approve of Trump trying to cut staff at government agencies? Again, you get a majority here. 51%. So yeah, Elon Musk might not be that popular, but these cuts and the idea of spending cuts, at least within the federal government and cutting at government agencies, that actually has majority support. I was truly surprised by this, Kate, but the numbers are the numbers.
Well, there is a view that cuts across Democrat and Republican of people thinking that Washington is too big, bloated federal government, waste, fraud, and abuse. I mean, those are drain the swamp is what people run on over and over again. How do they feel? What do they think they're actually cutting?
Yeah, what do they think they're actually cutting? Democrats want to argue that the type of spending that Musk is cutting is mainly necessary programs, but that comes in at just 36%. The wasteful spending actually wins the plurality here at 42%, according to a recent Washington Post Ipsos poll. And I think that is the reason why you see that when it comes to Musk and DOGE, you see, in fact, the majority believe he should have some influence because they believe, the plurality believe, that he is cutting wasteful spending, not necessary programs that Democrats are arguing.
Survey says a majority of people agree with Trump and Elon that DOGE is doing important work. Dusk and Moj. 54% want Elon to continue to influence public policy. 51% want the dynamic duo to cut government agency. Now look, it's true. 51% is not some massive supermajority in our polarized times. It's actually hard to get a supermajority for anything, frankly. Keep in mind, though, Trump's popular vote win, it was just about 50%. Actually, it was a smidge under at 49.8%, according to the latest numbers I could find. So the media's narrative is that these DOGE cuts are politically ruinous, that people who voted for Trump are horrified by what he's doing and they're ready to turn on him. But actually, the cuts enjoy slightly more support than Trump himself got in the election, which suggests to me the reverse is true. Even some people who didn't vote for Trump nevertheless do want the GOP and DOGE to cut waste, fraud, and abuse. So I think the mainstream media and the Democratic Party are frequently undercounting how popular the Trump agenda, including the cutting government part, actually is. Now, that's nothing new, of course. Media is constantly making it sound as if there's some large, critical mass of voters who oppose what the GOP stands for. I mean, look how they portrayed another storyline from last week when California Governor Gavin Newsom went on conservative podcaster Charlie Kirk's show and admitted he doesn't think trans women belong in women's sports. We discussed this on Rising last week. Niall and Stephen Kent did a fine job. Now, the local ABC outlet spun the story thus, quote, Governor Gavin Newsom is drawing heavy criticism after hosting a controversial and conservative activist on his new podcast and saying participation of transgender athletes in women's sports is deeply unfair. Heavy criticism? Really? From who? If they said he was drawing charges of hypocrisy or opportunism, I might agree with them. Criticism? Most people agree with that stance. Again, let the actual polls be the judge. According to the New York Times, 79% of Americans do not think trans women should compete in women's sports. It's 67% of Democrats. The polls don't lie. The mainstream media spent more time listening to the polls, which, to be fair, are in fact conducted expertly and correctly by mainstream media institutions in many cases, less time listening to the elite progressive commentators that they employ, well, the Democratic Party would be in a much healthier place. That's what the survey says.
So, Robby, you said at the start we will disagree or fight about this one. We will about the Elon Musk element of it. But to be fair, I actually agree with some of your overall point there. We have disagreements, particularly about COVID and various other topics. But, you know, I do have issues with the way the media has fractured, and I think it has in some ways lent itself to disinformation and misinformation and so forth. But I do think that previously, when legacy media was the media, it sometimes created the impression that certain things were more popular with the general public than they were because they were popular with the demographic that most mainstream journalists inhabit. And so immigration, I think, which you and I have odd sort of mix of opinions on. Right. I mean, I think that it was seen for too long as if, well, everyone just accepts a certain number of millions of unauthorized migrants in the country and so forth. And actually, that's not the case. The trans issue, which you pointed out in Newsom's case, I think it is part of that. So it is, I think, fine to call out media for creating a sort of false consensus on those issues when it didn't actually exist. On Elon Musk, there's a couple of things I would say where we do disagree there. One is almost every poll I have seen shows Musk himself less popular than Trump.
Musk himself, yes.
And so I do think that that's one of the reasons why he's a more inviting target for Democrats. Richest man in the world, trying to enact these very, very sweeping government reforms and government cuts. The bigger point I would make is I think that right now we're at the front end of this, where it has been borne aloft or along by the rhetoric, government's too big, there's wasteful government. And no one really disputes there is waste in government. What I am curious about is what happens when the rubber meets the road in terms of these cuts. Because there has been decades now of, I would say, anti-government rhetoric in this country. And it is government that sends out Social Security checks, does Medicare, funds the majority of Medicaid, does, you know, veterans affairs and healthcare and all of that. All of these things are popular, and if these cuts impede government's ability to deliver them, I think those poll numbers could change very fast.
Yes, those things are popular. I agree with that. And even the, you know, and I try to be willing to admit when I hold a policy position that is not itself popular. Right, I would privatize Social Security. I would cut Medicare. I would do all those things. I recognize that that is not politically popular, and the Republican Party probably shouldn't go along and do that. I mean, they have to calculate which of the things that they believe in doing, do they have enough political goodwill to ram through, even if they're not popular. That would be a case. Maybe they would think doing that is worth it. Abortion's another example where, well, maybe they think, well, why do we win if not to implement some policy we think is good, even if it's not popular? You're right about Elon personally. Elon is less popular than Trump for the simple reason that he's not not an entertainment personality with like an appealing. I mean, I'm a fan of his. I think what he's doing is good. I think his companies are very important. he is himself kind of weird in
Yeah.
the way he just behaves and talks and portrays himself, and that is not, he's not as appealing. I mean, Trump, love him or hate him, has some kind of appeal that is charisma, entertainment, some power that is unusual, that frankly no one else on earth has, which is why. And
I think
Elon
that's
has
a bit rosy, but I take the point that he has a.
there's something compelling about him. That you just
Yeah,
want to
so-
watch him talk, even if you don't like him. People want to rage listen to him. You're
I don't even
grimacing.
particularly love
well,
to
that's how
rage
people
listen,
feel.
but listen, he has an appeal to his base. so no
Elon
question.
Musk was not a political figure before, and now he is a political figure. And if you just become a political figure, your popularity is going to go down because we're so closely divided. You're right that if these cuts start being about fundamental government services, and maybe that's what will happen, there will be a hit to the popularity. But the media is, I think, getting ahead of itself and already saying, oh, the coalition is fracturing. There's already some massive backlash pointing to, if we're going to talk about Elon's car companies being targeted a little bit, which, maybe that's a sign of some kind of blowback against Musk. But I think the massive backlash against what Trump's doing is, maybe it'll happen. It's just not there yet.
The popular backlash isn't there yet, but I think that it is very valid to question the wisdom of these policies and how they will manifest themselves, whether it's the government cuts or the tariffs question, where people like the slogan, but once the slogan goes into effect, how does that work? I've always thought that Trump himself has much more in common with talk radio guys like Rush Limbaugh than he does with standard orthodox governing people. And so what happens when you put a kind of talk radio mentality atop government? We're about to find out.
We find out you get the most politically successful Republican in our lifetime, but
Well, or
do
you
you get good governance?
Or you get somebody who crashes the economy and has all sorts of other baleful effects.
We'll see. Next up on Rising, we will discuss the fallout from pro-Palestinian protesting on college campuses across the country.